If you are a council member, please take your seat. That looks like Glenn Forbes from behind. You coming? I thought you sat up here with us. Everybody, and how is everyone doing today? We are calling the meeting to order of today's Mobility, Infrastructure, and Transportation Committee meeting. We have a quorum that's been established, and I want to welcome everyone to the meeting, including those of you who will be taking a vote on the first action item, which calls for approval from our February 13th meeting minutes.
Second.
Oh, you guys are so good. All in favor? I guess there's no discussion. Any opposed? And with that, motion is approved. We do have 3 briefings. I'm going to change the order of the agenda. The second item will be striping, as opposed to going through stormwater first. But my first item is to call for a briefing from Michael Morris, Director of Transportation for the North Central Texas Council of Governments on high-speed rail. Mr. Morris, welcome once again.
Madam Mayor, it's very nice to be with you. Thank you for the invitation to be with you today.
Absolutely.
I think I'm here because I was the lucky participant with Amtrak to present high-speed rail between Houston and Dallas, and then high-speed rail between Dallas, Arlington, and Fort Worth.
Exactly.
So it was interesting. I'm trying to select my English words correctly. It was an interesting morning. And I think we need to just let it be, put in its place. Don't get too excited one way or the other. I believe we'll find a win-win solution like we always do in transportation. You have a city council that has a city manager that is no longer in place. And you have a city council who is basically being briefed maybe for the first time on high-speed rail between Dallas and Houston, with the leading Amtrak high-speed rail person from Amtrak actually in attendance to make that presentation. We're working closely on a seamless connection of that service, obviously over to Arlington and Fort Worth. In that particular process, it's critical that becomes seamless. But what's complicating it for Dallas is they have a brand-new convention center that's happening in the shadow of that station, a whole bunch of convention center hotels, and they are finally addressing Union Station, the Eddie Bernice Johnson Union Station, which now gets a new high-speed rail at grade service from Atlanta to the Dallas and Fort Worth region. So there's a whole bunch of things that are happening at the same time. Our presentation is integrating them into a very sophisticated system that includes both high-speed rail and last-mile delivery of those other items. And most of the concern is coming from one large developer that happens to be in close proximity to that particular location. Now, to be fair, that developer has known about high-speed rail to Fort Worth for an awful long time. We just let time to settle the issue. I'm not going to try to solve it all by myself, so there'll be a point when I come back to ask for assistance from Fort Worth and Arlington. But at this particular point in my presentation to the RTC on Thursday, now is not the time to make that particular engagement. There will be a time if necessary, but there may not be a necessary time, because I believe seamless. This is our generation's DFW airport, high-speed rail. And I think that eventually will surface and come to light. So as a staff recommendation to elected officials, just, it's always at darkest before morning light. But we got good news to present to you today, and I think we should stay on the good news for some time. So I have two handouts for you. The first is a letter from the Federal Transit Administration. So we've been in negotiations with FTA for about 2 years on eliminating a whole host of questions they have on high-speed rail between Fort Worth and Dallas. The federal government, under new federal rules, has to be in the environmental process for 1 year or less. So FTA now feels we can environmentally clear high-speed rail between Dallas and Fort Worth in less than a year. We're basically on the Interstate 30 corridor. You know where we are in downtown Fort Worth. So this letter basically lays out our ability now to proceed on the environmental clearance of high-speed rail between downtown Dallas and downtown Fort Worth. I do not think it's a coincidence that this letter came out 5 days before that particular hearing, and now the reality of high-speed rail from Houston to Dallas and Dallas to Fort Worth is now setting in, and some policy officials just need some time to sort all of that out. The second piece of paper to present to you, and you will get continuing education credits on the second one because it's quite complicated with all the arrows. And we can send these electronically to staff, so staff can electronically send this to the appropriate people, so people listening to us will have these details. But I now have two paths forward to fund and construct high-speed rail between Dallas and Fort Worth. So the arrows on the top is the process we've been going through with the Federal Transit Administration. We were in alternatives analysis for about 2 years, and this is why this issue in Dallas is not like a new issue, since we've been doing this for some time. Then we went into pre-NEPA for about 2 years, and now the letter I just showed you has us going into NEPA, meaning Federal Transit Administration believes we can finish within 12 months. This gives me an opportunity to implement the rail service with either Amtrak, who's building between Dallas and Houston. So they very much appreciate this one-seat ride to maximize ridership to Arlington and Fort Worth. So there may be an opportunity for Amtrak to say, hey, just like Texas Central Partners said before, we wish to go to Fort Worth with our particular investment. In fact, we are pitching to them they should build Fort Worth to Dallas first and have it opened to the world as they build their Dallas to Houston facility over a much longer distance, over a longer period of time. They haven't taken me up on that yet, but I now have a path forward to do that if that particular item is of interest. And then we went through conversations with all the high-speed rail providers in the world a few years ago. And we have interest from a lot of high-speed rail providers to potentially pay for and operate the high-speed rail service. We wish not to explore that at this particular point because it might trigger a cross-platform transfer instead of a one-seat ride. If the technology is the same, you just sit on your train, wait 2 minutes, and then continue your trip to Dallas or continue your trip to Fort Worth. If it's a cross-platform transfer, you have to get out and transfer, and then obviously what we're fighting is a 17-floor distance to travel between a subway station and what is the official seven-story off-the-ground high-speed rail station to Fort Worth. The other path forward is on the bottom. We have officially applied and won. So we're one of maybe a half dozen entities in the U.S. that now have access to federal money for the implementation of high-speed rail. That program is called the Corridor ID program. So if you talk to the federal government no longer has Dallas to Houston as the rail line. The federal government has Fort Worth to Houston as the rail line in the Corridor ID program. So our staff will be going through the FRA procedures for implementation. If we successfully implement those stages, we qualify for federal funds from the federal government to build high-speed rail. So by following both paths, we potentially have 3 funding sources that may eventually be commingled. I can picture an FRA participant, I can picture an Amtrak participant or some other high-speed rail provider, and I can picture the private sector opportunities that may exist as part of a P3 provider, similar to the P3 provider we have on dynamically priced managed lanes in the region that produced a $7 billion commitment to the Regional Transportation Council. So Mayor, I said I probably can't say much. I can answer questions because I don't want to ping pong in the media some conversation between Dallas and Fort Worth. I don't think that's the best way to solve this particular issue. I think staff is asking you to let staff work this out for 30, 60 days and see where we head up. I'm not convinced that the developer, when they go see high-speed rail in our country, like San Francisco, the high-speed rail station, and or other countries, I don't believe their vision will be the same. I've been told when you see high-speed rail, the density around the station is so dramatic that they will eventually come around to the vision that we are suggesting. So 2 pieces of good news.
Yes.
We have 2 paths forward with 2 different federal agencies. As promised, we will fund high-speed rail with no funding that will compete with your other transportation projects in the region. So the high-speed rail path is on its own path when it comes to funding. We've laid this out with these 2 environmental procedures we're going through. I'm optimistic that we'll resolve these questions that are coming up in Dallas. But to be fair to Dallas, they're absorbing a high-speed rail station in a shadow of a brand-new convention center that's being reoriented, in the shadow of a whole bunch of convention center hotels, in the shadow of a new Eddie Bernice Johnson intermodal facility that now has additional Amtrak service going to Atlanta. So, Madam Mayor, Madam Chair, for me at the RTC, I'll stop there and take any questions any of you have on the Transportation Committee.
Well, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to bring this highly significant information today. And Michael, you might recall when we opened the TRE, not when we brought the TRE into downtown Fort Worth, I never will forget Congresswoman Kay Granger declared, we will have high-speed rail from Fort Worth. And at that time, Chairman Dave Reagan and I looked at each other and said, we will? And so I'm glad that she's still in office to see this foundation being laid. And I just want to say thank you for being here. Any questions from any of the mobility members here? Great. Michael.
I know why you're not asking me questions, and I appreciate that, and there'll be a time and place for everything. And give us a chance to let the dust settle. I promise you I won't do it on my own. I promised the mayor of Arlington I wouldn't do it on my own. I've asked him to take a partnership position right now. We'll see how we do on Thursday at the RTC as I lay out that partnership position. And we will keep you up to date and come as often as necessary to make sure we can ensure a one-seat ride from Dallas to Houston, Dallas to Arlington, Fort Worth to Dallas, Fort Worth to Houston, because anything other than that is a system that is not in the best interest of the traveling public, and therefore not in the best interest of a business model when you're now developing a national transportation system that the rest of the United States would be envious to see.
Well, I spoke to the Arlington mayor just as he was landing in DC yesterday, and looking forward to seeing him and all the things he has going on in his live town of Arlington. Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you very
Many
much.
of us will see you tomorrow. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Moving right along to the next item on the agenda, and I'm going to hold on to this graphic. This is going to be very important in days to come. We moved item C so that it moves up the agenda because everybody in Fort Worth who I talk to is talking about the need for pavement markings. And I have been taking pictures and writing down notes as I'm driving throughout the city. I do hope you have good news for us.
Yes, ma'am, I do. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. So today I'm going to talk about the fiscal year 24 Pavement Markings Maintenance Program update. My name is Quinnell Johnson, and I'm Engineering Manager for TPW. So the purpose of this presentation, we're going to talk about the background, the fiscal year 24 Pavement Markings Program update, the life cycle of pavement markings, scoring and prioritization criteria, before and after pictures, implemented roadway segment list, and then finally next steps. So in the background, in 2016, a survey was done and it was determined that there was 8.7 million linear feet of pavement markings in the city of Fort Worth. We had a recent survey done and it showed 13 million linear feet, but it included TxDOT maintained roadways. So we're working with the GIS team to remove those TxDOT maintained roadways. So in fiscal year 23, Transportation Management received additional funding of $5 million, which put us at a funding level of $8.7 million on a 3-year cycle to replace 2.9 million linear feet of pavement markings each year. The fiscal year 24 budget allocated $10.4 million, and it's anticipated to restripe 2.9 million linear feet. So the fiscal year 24 Pavement Markings Program update, on your left, the design complete per quarter. In quarter 1, we completed 75% of design, and in quarter 2, we completed 25%, which put us at 100% completion. On the right, implementation per quarter. In quarter 1, we implemented 392,933 linear feet. Our goal was 300,000 linear feet, so we exceeded that goal. In quarter 2, at this point, we've implemented 391,400 linear feet, and this is only through February 28th. We're still collecting data, so by March 31st, we'll meet our goal of 600,000 linear feet for quarter 2. Quarter 3 goal, we plan to implement 950,000 linear feet, and in the quarter 4 goal, we plan to implement 1,050,000 linear feet.
Can I ask a question real quick? Can you go back to that slide?
Okay.
So it looks like for each quarter, we're increasing our goal.
So we just exceed. So the goal for all the quarters, they add up to the 2.9 million. So as we go through quarter 1 and we went over our goal, it helps us toward the end because 1,050,000 is a high goal, right? So the more we can do in these earlier quarters, the better it is. We don't have to do as much at the end.
So, but we're relying, right, like if I'm looking at that pie chart, we
Right.
rely more, the second quarter, we did more in the first than we did in the first quarter. We're projecting, we're hoping, right, more in the third than the second and fourth and third.
Yes, ma'am.
Are we adding additional resources to get to that? How do we expand that number in those subsequent quarters?
So right now we have 4 contractors. We just got the 4th one working, so that's helping us to get there as well. And then we have our in-house crew that's doing as much as they can to help. So for the life cycle of pavement markings, the application of pavement markings is done primarily by contractors. We do have an in-house crew. They do urgent striping at intersections. Application consists of removing moisture and debris, adding a primer, and then applying the pavement marking. Thermoplastic pavement markings will last 3 to 4 years. There is a 3M material that will last longer than 4 years, but it has a much higher cost than thermoplastic. Moisture will cause pavement markings to fade quickly. And when I talk about moisture, I mean like morning dew on the pavement, or say it rained for a couple of days and you don't let the pavement dry out, that will cause the pavement markings to fade quickly. Ideally, pavement markings will be reapplied every 4 years or as needed. So here's a couple of pavement marking examples. On your left, here's Hemphill Street. The year applied was fiscal year 2020, and the year the picture taken was fiscal year 2024, and it's holding up well. And then on your right, you see Timberland Boulevard. The year applied was fiscal year 2020, and the year a picture was taken was fiscal year 2024. There's a couple of things going on. First, it was probably applied when moisture was on the ground. And second, we had that winter storm in 2021, and that caused the pavement markings to deteriorate rapidly. So for our other examples, we have Biddison Street on the left, and the year applied was fiscal year 2020. The year the picture taken was fiscal year 2024, and it gets a good amount of volume of traffic, so you can see it's kind of faded. And on the right, Bel Air Drive South, year applied fiscal year 2020, year picture taken fiscal year 2024, and it's holding up well, but doesn't get nearly as much traffic as Benson Street. So pavement markings project scoring criteria, prioritization of a project is based on a scale of 100 points. For striping condition, up to 15 points, roadway type, up to 25 points, crashes per mile, up to 25 points, and then other criteria, up to 35 points. And this is it near a school or transit facility? Is it in a super majority minority area, or is it a safety improvement to that roadway? Those are things we take into consideration. Before and after pictures. On the left, for North Main Street, the before picture, the pavement markings are faded. The after picture on the right, you can see the newly implemented pavement markings, and this is in between Belknap and Northside Drive. Then we have Cleveland Road. The before picture on the left is faded, but you can see the newly implemented striping after on the right. So this is the fiscal year implemented roadway segments list, and for the residents at home, I'm going to slowly go through the presentation, and it's recorded as well so they can check and see if their street is on the list for fiscal year 24. And then finally, next steps. So we're going to provide an update on the fiscal year 24 pavement markings program in the third quarter of fiscal year 24. We're going to continue reviewing the inventory data collected in fiscal year 23 for pavement markings with the GIS team. And then we're going to use design consultant to supplement in-house design so all design is completed on time. And that's the end of my presentation. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I do have one, but I'll let the other members go first. I see you going, Charlie.
So, quick question on the four contractors. Are they all required to use the same material, and is it all provided by the same, I guess, third party?
So a couple of contractors, they only use thermoplastic. We are experimenting with different type of materials. So there's a material called multipolymer that will last a little bit longer than thermoplastic. And there's about 2 contractors that use that as well. So we're experimenting with that. And then one contractor, they do the 3M material. And we only used it on Hewlin Street just to kind of see what's the longevity of it. And so those are the 3 materials. So it varies by contractor.
Okay, and like, how do they bill? Is it like you tell them what you're gonna pay them? Is that how that works?
We tell them what material to use. We give them the drawings, and then they bill based on the cost for that drawing or for that location.
Okay, and then the last question is does somebody from staff go out there to inspect it after it's done?
We have 2 inspectors.
Okay, awesome, thanks.
Any other questions? Well, I have a question for you. When it comes to reporting these streets, and this could be a future agenda item, just so you know, I'm curious as to how you identify the streets. And once before, my same question for code was, are these generated by the public more so, or are we going out being good stewards and staff is inspecting? And I know the answer is going to be both, but I don't believe it. And so I would like to know how streets that make the list are, how they get on the list. Are they complaints generated by the public or staff being proactive?
So staff is being proactive. We knew that the arterials were in the worst condition. So we wanted to do the high volume roadways first. So you'll see mostly arterials from fiscal year 23 and then a lot still on fiscal year 24. Our plan is in fiscal year 25, hit the collectors. Local streets, residential, don't have markings. And so we know that we can hit the collectors. We have the arterials done. We'll have most of Fort Worth striped. Also, some of us live in Fort Worth, so we drive it every day. We kind of see these streets. We know that they need to be restriped, and then we're using ViewWorks resident requests as well to help us out. What streets are the worst condition? This arterial might be worse than that one. We'll jump on this one first.
So when you talk about major arterials, does that mean you guys have looked at all the major arterials and ranked them?
Yes, we're using that scoring and prioritization criteria. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like that list.
Okay, will do.
Can send that to me. And can you tell the public how they should report problem streets needing striping or buttons to your department?
They can either use ViewWorks or they can use the app, the My Fort Worth app, and report that way.
And what's ViewWorks? I hadn't heard of that.
So I think it comes in through customer service, but the way we see it at TPW is through ViewWorks. So they can send it through customer service.
Okay. And to the app, I see you, Councilmember Beck.
I want to thank you. It was, I guess, 2 budget cycles ago that we really came to understand how inadequate our pavement marking program was here at the city of Fort Worth. And y'all have been so responsive to this program, and I think it shows. One of the first streets that y'all restriped was Magnolia as part of this, and I promise I had nothing to do with that. It's just luck of the draw. But the enthusiasm that I got from residents that we had painted the street that they could see it was truly surprising to me. And so I know this seems small in the grand scheme of things, but our residents surely do appreciate it. And I surely do appreciate that y'all aren't just delivering, but you're helping deliver ahead of schedule so that we can see. And I just, on another note, I'm teaching a 16-year-old how to drive, and I have never needed pavement markings more in my life. So thank you for having those as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Crane.
Sure, thank you. If you want to teach my 15-year-old how to drive.
I
It is
saw
a
that
traumatic
tire.
It
experience.
is traumatic experience. We've discovered potholes in the city of Fort Worth.
Is that what
Didn't know this-
happened to that tire?
Oh, my gosh, let's not even, yes. But thank you. I want to give commendation to Councilwoman Beck for bringing that up too. I was just speaking to a meeting today, and one of the people brought up, thank you, an elderly gentleman said, thank you for the pavement markings, et cetera. It is one of those things that we talk about here, the quality of life. People see that and know that their tax dollars are being spent well. So I appreciate that. And something else she brought up too, I think is good. If the quarters are as they're going, it seems like fourth quarter goal is 1 million linear feet. Is that kind of what our target goal is? Our
Yeah.
target goal? Yeah.
It is. So that is during the summer months, and a lot more striping can be done in the summer months.
Yeah, I bring that up because I think the idea is on this that every quarter, third quarter, you'll bring an update. I'd love if this number is correct. 2016 asset inventory shows 8.7 million. Are we going to update that number for 2024? Because it's 8 years ago at this point.
Yeah, in that 2023 data, we're working with the GIS team.
Okay.
And so once we remove those textile roadways, I'm sure that number will be what we have in Fort Worth.
Cool. I think it's great if we're doing 1 million linear feet a quarter. We know that we have 8.7 plus probably more linear feet, that every basically 4 years, we're getting to all the streets that we need to.
Yes,
That's
sir.
kind of, yeah, thank you.
Alan, you have any thanks to give?
So I will simply echo Councilman Crane's comments and thank Mayor Bivens, and thank you also to Councilwoman Beck for bringing this forward a couple of years ago. It was well needed, and thank you for all the work you've done. It is noticeable and it is appreciated in the city.
Yes, sir.
And with that, I can just tell you, I don't have any thanks from my East Side constituents. Maybe when they hear this, they'll call in some love for you guys, but all I hear is, we can't see the streets. So sorry, I can't have any love to share. Thank you for your report. Next action item, we're going to hear from Linda Young, who's going to give us a report on stormwater capital delivery projects. So Linda, the podium is yours, and thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Bivens.
Can you speak up louder or pull the microphone closer to you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Bivens and members of the committee. I'm Linda Young, Engineering Manager with TPW, and together with Stephen Nichols, who is the Stormwater Program Manager, we'll be giving y'all an update on Stormwater Capital Program this afternoon. And items we'll be discussing are cost escalation, then some updates on delivery details, our FY25 budget planning, and then some awards that we have received recently from other organizations. So, cost escalation, I know that y'all have been hearing a lot about the cost escalation for capital projects and everything else in recent years and months. We have not been able to put our finger on one bad actor. It's just a mixed bag, concrete, asphalt, staffing availability, supply chain issues, and so forth. We have a graphic here showing just two recent projects that we were comparing, Trentman Street and Randall Mill. Trentman Street, our 90% design, you can see the difference between the estimated cost and the bid cost. And then on our Randall Mill, you can see the difference between our 25% design estimated cost and then our 90% design estimated cost. And these are fairly typical of projects. Now we'll go to happier news. We received bond funds in two separate tranches. We received $53 million in FY '21 and $43 million in FY '23. And we anticipate having the initial tranche 100% expended by the fourth quarter of FY '25, and on the second tranche, 100% expended by the third quarter of FY '28. This is a graphic showing our goals for our delivery. Our initial goals are in italics based upon, what we've learned about cost increases and so forth. Our revised goals are now in bold. Okay. These are some of the projects that we completed in FY '23. We completed one major hazardous roadway overtopping mitigation project at 28th and Decatur on Lebo Channel. Then we completed 12 hazardous roadway overtopping mitigation safety projects. These are smaller projects that perhaps we put up signage, striping, guardrails, lighting, and so forth, just to make the crossing safer. We completed 4 major and 15 programmable pipe rehab projects. These are underground storm drain pipes that are in degraded condition. We're being proactive, and we're trying to rehab them before they continue to degrade, result in sinkholes, and endanger the public. We completed 1 flood major mitigation project. This was a partnership project with Crowley ISD. They were extending their stadium and gave us an opportunity to do some flood mitigation in that neighborhood. Then we completed 13 programmable reactive projects. These are smaller projects that occur from time to time across the city, quite often reported by citizens, and they can be different types of projects, maybe a storm drain rehab, maybe a channel stabilization because of erosion, maybe flood mitigation, and so forth. Then we've been working on our Fort Worth Central City projects here north of downtown. This is a program that is partnership with Tarrant Regional Water District and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The projects that we are responsible for construction on are currently under construction, and we anticipate that our costs will be reimbursed by TRWD and the TIF in the area. Now we'll talk about what we've been working on from our FY '24 fee increase. We have 3 large-scale flood mitigation projects. At the top, we have our Upper Lebo flood mitigation. In the middle, Linwood and West 7th, and then down at the bottom, McCart and Berry. This is what we presented to all of you last year in the budget season when we were requesting a fee increase. This shows the progress that we intend to make on these major projects, also with bond issues, and we will also be seeking grant funding. It will positively impact the Lebo delivery schedule. We have been working on the Lebo project longer than we have the other projects, and so we're in a position now to request grant funding. We have requested 2 FEMA grants. They're 25-75% matching grants, and so for each we would need to provide $16.6 million. And we are in the process, we're getting ready to apply to the Texas Water Development Board, the Flood Infrastructure Fund. This will be a combination grant and a zero-interest loan, and we can request up to $90 million. And the good thing about this is that the grants and loans can be combined, and if we are successful with the FIF, then we can use that as part of our match for FEMA. And now I'd like to turn it over to Stephen.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm going to talk just a little bit about our FY25 budget planning, which we're just starting to get kicked off. So, like you've heard, like you and I, we're all dealing with increased costs across the board. Just broadly, the cost of doing business is going up, but we're also in the business of constructing storm drain improvements and using professional services. Linda mentioned some increased costs in construction. We're seeing just for professional services, increased costs and hourly rates going up. One of our largest professional services costs is in development review, and we hope to start having conversations about increased cost recovery for those services. We're also thinking through how do we extend the life of our existing assets. So if we can make our storm drains last longer, then long-term that reduces our capital costs. So for example, you and I, we both do oil changes in our cars because it's cheaper to do an oil change than it is to replace the engine every 5 years. We're also thinking through and talking about those grants as those opportunities present themselves and making sure we're able to maximize those opportunities. In February, we met with the Stormwater Stakeholder Group. We shared some of our thoughts and plans with them and got lots of helpful feedback. This table provides a high-level summary of the needs across the city in our stormwater network. So we've got road culverts, where hopefully the creek goes under the road and not over it. We've got storm drain pipes throughout the city, about 1,000 miles of those, and they're starting to deteriorate. And we have 230 miles of channels across the city. Big picture, this is really just saying we have enormous needs and limited budget. Our 5-year capital budget is around 97 million, a little bit less than 20 million a year. And we're going to call our estimated needs around $2 billion. So that looks like about 100 years to address that. Sort of a reminder of where we were back in September. City Council approved a fee increase of 15%, split 50-50 between large-scale capital improvements and maintenance. So City Council invited us back to talk about what it would take to accelerate those large-scale capital projects. As you can see, the stormwater utility fee increase that would be needed to accelerate those projects and deliver complete solutions more quickly, those fees would be quite substantial. I kind of want to turn our attention just a little bit from the large-scale flood mitigation projects. Our engineers are cranking away on those solutions. And while they're doing that, I'd like us to look at storm drain rehab for a little bit. The image on the top right shows a map of all of our storm drains across the city. The red ones are considered high risk. We're inspecting and condition assessing our storm drain network at about 40 miles per year. We're using risk factors to identify where we need to look first, and our consultants using machine learning to improve the accuracy of those predictions. So we're looking where we expect to find problems first, and we're finding them. We're 150 miles into our condition assessment, and we've identified 8 miles of high-risk storm drain systems. Portions of those systems look like the picture on the bottom left, where the storm drain has longitudinal cracking because the storm drain has been slightly crushed. So one of the reasons that storm drain rehab is important is because the storm drains also support the infrastructure above them. And so in the middle photo, you see a sinkhole. That's a potential outcome of failed storm drain systems. In addition to the critical condition assets, we're also finding lots of storm drains with exposed reinforcement. What that means is the reinforcement corrodes faster and accelerates degradation of that pipe. The 8 miles of storm drain, our estimates are around $35 to $56 million to repair or replace those. Our current storm drain rehab budget is about $3 million per year on average. So what that means potentially is that it would take 12 to 19 years to repair those, assuming no cost inflation, which we know is not a good assumption. And our consultant recommends we address those fairly quickly in the next 6 to 12 months. What that means is that we'd either need to identify another source of funding or reallocate funding from existing projects. So in summary, looking forward to FY25 budget planning. Our top priorities include storm drain rehab, extending the life cycle of our assets, continuing the implementation of FY24 fee increase plan, which was the large-scale flood mitigation projects, and the implementation of the 5-year plan for maintenance, as well as pursuing grant opportunities as they present themselves. So our next steps are to gather feedback from you all, from City Council, from Fort Worth Lab, and from other stakeholders. And here's Linda to talk about some awards.
Thank you, Stephen. We'd like to share with y'all some awards that our capital program recently received from other organizations. We received a state award from the American Council of Engineering Companies, ACEC, and a national award for engineering excellence. We received a state award from the Texas Floodplain Management Association for community service, and we received state awards from the American Public Works Association Texas chapter and the ACEC for small project for our Shoreview Culvert Improvement Project, which is out by the Joint Reserve Base. So with that, Stephen and I would like to open up for questions and discussion.
Well, congratulations on those awards. And
Thank
do we
you.
have any questions from staff? You have been just that good. Thank you both. Any future agenda items from this committee? I've already logged one. No future agenda items? Well, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All in favor, see you guys at 6 o'clock sharp.